Africans are animals. That's essentially what you imply when you say that ingratitude is something that cannot be transferred to humans. I don't know, maybe I'm the one who's wrong here. Maybe my mental faculties are not fully operational. You tell me. And then, is it rage or is it ritualism? These are the kind of questions we have to ask ourselves when we have a young man found with the head of his girlfriend in his bag. And finally, if you can't beat them, you sure as hell better join them. This week, we're going to be shining light on a phenomenal woman who is giving young adolescent girls an environment for them to fulfill their potential and realize some of their wildest dreams. If you are interested to hear what I'm talking about, what I'm yapping on about, then do stay tuned because we're about to have such a phenomenal episode. Hello guys, and welcome back to another amazing episode. I cannot wait to discuss the topics that we're about to have today, and I am so excited to have you guys back here. Thank you. And so if you see me a bit flustered today, don't be surprised because we are stating facts today, okay? We are setting some records straight because some people just want to be sending out the wrong sentiments, and that's just not right, okay? That's not okay when we know what we know. So if you do not know what I am talking about, I am talking about how earlier this week President Macron of France made some very condescending statements when it came to his relation with some of the Sahel states in Africa. So he was making a speech at one of the events that he was in attendance of, and I believe that the bulk of the audience was made up of diplomats, and so obviously the issue of France and Africa was bound to come up. And he basically said that he was shocked at the ingratitude of African countries, especially when it comes to them just like sending home all the French troops that were formerly in their countries. He then also went on to essentially say that this ingratitude is something that's not transferred to humans. Look, maybe things are lost in translation, but for me, I really just understood that to be very condescending and very insulting, because are you essentially trying to say we animals? I don't know. Make it make sense. Make the maths balance itself out, because it's clearly not here. So with that, I wanted to highlight a few things. One of them being the fact that I really appreciated how some of the African countries had a very strong response, basically condemning these remarks, right? And these remarks, I also feel like served as a way of reminding France and even the rest of the world that what this man is saying is not the full story. And so today I just want to pull a bit of what the actual full picture is looking like. And to start off, I want us to go back to 2017. And the reason for this is because I really want to try and establish this pattern that President Macron has had when it comes to Africa, and why I say that he has had a very consistent habit of insulting Africans at a very audacious level, if I should say that. So basically, let's go back to July 2017. Where are we? We are at the G20 summit, and President Macron is being interviewed, and he's asked a question about Africa's development, right? And basically France's plan and agenda when it comes to our development. What does he say? He says that the continent's challenges were civilizational and linked to women having 7 or 8 children. You know me, when things are not making sense, we take a moment of silence. Why do we take a moment of silence? Because prayers need to be made. Prayers need to be made because what? Really? You're gonna literally deduce every single thing that is happening on the continent to the reproduction, what you call the system of African women. Okay, all right. And you know, some of you may be like, oh, but people like, this is not like a big deal, like this is not. No, this is a huge issue because why? One, it serves as an indicator to the fact that a lot of these European Western countries, they come up with solutions that really are so far-fetched and off the charts when it comes to, you know, diagnosing and actually solving the problems we have. And why do they do that? Because again, they don't have a very realistic and detailed, and even worse, informed understanding of the actual challenges that Africans are faced with. But the second thing is that they want to remove themselves from having to take accountability of the role in which they have played in having African states find themselves in the position that they're in, and not have played but continue to play. So it's just very hypocritical. It's a lot of Judas Iscariot's behavior that is happening. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, we move on. Now let's jump from 2017 to 2025, when, you know, the French president is making these remarks of basically saying that y'all didn't thank me, you know, y'all didn't give us the pat in the shoulder that we deserved. But he made a tweet that said that France has neither the capacity nor the legitimacy to ensure Africa's security and sovereignty, right? And for me, I found this to be so important because he's saying a lot without saying much. And the lot that he is not saying, the subtext of this tweet essentially is the fact that there is a lot of benefits that France has been able to have in it establishing itself as a neocolonial power in modern day, what you call this geopolitics, when it comes to the Sahel countries that it was really just remaining ever so dominant in. And so with that, I just want to list some political and economic things that France was benefiting from with the Sahel countries. So because I don't want to take up too much time, I'm going to give a very general, you know, explanation, but then on the side, either here or here, you will actually have the actual facts and the stats of the things that I'm talking about. So firstly, at an economic point, we obviously know when it comes to resources, France is not the only one that's guilty of this, but many neocolonial powers have intentionally made an effort to stay ever present in African countries because of the various resources that we give them that are basically the backbone to a lot of their major, I would even say billion-dollar industry products, you know, that they are able to produce as a result of the resources that we give them. And, you know, for those maybe who might not be aware, the resources that African countries normally, you know, give or trade off in, they are normally given in a very raw state. So literally from mine to ship to the country. Many of our African countries have not gone through even the first phase of industrialization, of having, you know, factories whereby they manufacture these raw resources into different products to sell into these other countries. And this is important because it allows for these African countries to have an economic, you know, leverage and advantage in terms of products and, you know, various commodities that they can really monopolize when it comes to the global market, thus increasing their not just only their sovereignty, but that's increasing also their weight when it comes to, you know, their presence in a lot of like these, you know, international multilateral organizations such as the UN and etc. So from a resource perspective, many of these Sahel countries were, you know, trading in France when it comes to uranium, with gold, as well as with other minerals as well. Also, it is important to note that from the time of colonization right up until present, France has been gaining a lot from an agricultural point of view, particularly during the colonial era. France extracted cash crops such as cotton, peanuts, from the Sahel to fuel its own industries. And if you know anything about colonization, you know that one of the main factors that pushed colonization to the way that it did is because many countries in the West were using African countries as well as South American countries as their base, as their foundation, essentially, to establish themselves as economic world powers. So they would be getting many of these minerals and these resources and these cash crops at little, like close to nothing, and then after they've made their commodities and various products from this, would sell them at exorbitant prices. I'm not even talking about how much they would sell it back to us. Yeah. Also, let us talk about the colonial currency, the French currency that many of the Sahel countries were using, right? And this system ensured that African nations were still put in a position whereby they would deposit a significant portion of their foreign reserves with the French treasury. So it makes you really realize, or really ask yourself, how economically strong or powerful would France be as a global player if it were not for the fact that basically, and I'm going to list like the number of the Sahel countries or the Francophone countries here, if these countries were not depositing a great deal of their own reserves into the French treasury. And why is this also significant? It's also significant because it ensured that France at the global stage of like economics, and then being able to get credit for whatever things that they want to get credit for, they would get that credit at yay cheap, because now they've got so much that they can back that credit up with. The other thing is that also it gave them a great deal of economic leverage, right? So I'm not going to discuss much about the military presence because I think we are all well versed and well informed about that. But another thing I do want to highlight is just how, from a political point of view, the foothold that they were able to have over Francophone nations ensured that even at a geopolitical level, they have a diplomatic leverage that is in certain spaces really uncontested and really puts them at a really unfair advantage. So what do I mean by this, right? So let's talk about organizations such as the UN, right? The United Nations, whereby they have various votes on various different things that obviously will affect all countries around the world, right? And what France was able to do was, because of the control that they had, they would rally the votes of Francophone African countries to ensure that France is able to amplify its own global influence. Were you ever going to say thank you for that, France? Were you ever going to say thank you for that, President Macron? Yeah, I didn't think so. Also, let us not forget rather about the cultural influence. I believe it's in my previous video, or one of my videos from ago, I mentioned the fact that France's colonization the way that France colonized Africa was very different to how the Anglo powers colonized other African countries. So the Anglo powers, they used a strategy of divide and conquer, whilst France used a system of assimilation. So assimilation meaning that if you learn French, if you can live like a French person, if you can act like a French person, etc., you would basically be able to more easily assimilate right into higher places of economic, political, social status and standing. I believe even in some cases it even afforded a lot of Africans within these Francophone nations to easily move on and be able to find a place within France, if it was that they migrated there, right? But also, more than that, within these Francophone nations, one of the things that France did, not only under colonization but even in present day, is that they would maintain soft power, right, through a lot of their cultural and educational institutions. So basically they had a lot of Francophone organizations and or media outlets like the RFI, I believe, so the Radio France International. And basically these would be used as means and mediums essentially to reinforce these pro-French sentiments within these Sahel country societies. Now, why is this a significant thing? Now, you as somebody who might see this at surface value, you might think, oh, this is not like a major thing. Yeah, they're just having like a radio station and all these learning institutions. No, this is important when it comes to having a country at a very physical level condition people to who actually holds the power. And why do I say this? One of my lecturers, right, within African studies, he said something that really changed my brain chemistry when it comes to how a government will assert and make its own sovereignty visible, right, to its people. Because think about this, you have one president and maybe at most about 30 to 40 ministers. These people collectively, as well as everyone who is employed within civil government, cannot in any way be present around be present to know everything that's happening everywhere. And as a result, if you can't be present to know everything that's happening around everywhere, how is it that you're going to be able to show people that you are the power, you're the one who's in control, and have them basically enter into that social contract whereby they recognize your authority, right? Now, one of the ways he said that governments are able to do this is to have, what you call this, governmental institutions, right? Or institutions rather that represent that there is a providing of services to the people that is given by the government. So a quick example could be something like having a mail office, right? So a posting office, or even a police station, right? Making sure that every community has a police station or every community has a post office. These are just two very basic examples, but these are just organizations and little institutions that go to show that there is a government, and this government has got systems and structures in place to assert its governance. Am I making sense? Are you catching my drift? So, what is France doing? France is not only having its military presence here, but it's also establishing not only just businesses. I'm not talking about businesses here and companies. No, we are talking about Francophone organizations that are intentionally pushing pro-French sentiments around these Francophone countries, so that even the citizens can know, yeah, we have our own president here, but the actual big dog is across the pond. We will just leave it at that, because deep that, as our UK brothers say, let us just deep that. Okay, so anyways, guys, we don't want to make this too long. As always, we try to keep these episodes now short, but as you can see, I hope that in me sharing, and this is just a very topographic view, right, of the picture that I'm trying to paint. But what I'm trying to show you is that France or President Macron has got absolutely no right, absolutely not even 0.00000% right to play victim in any way at all. And to even show you how France has really done a disservice, right, to Africans, and they are aware of this, but they want to come play innocent. I have reposted in my comments, in my community tab rather, I've reposted a video by one of an African news outlet that I really also recommend, guys. Stay on it. They give some amazing updates on what's happening around the continent. But they shared a story by illustrating, this was earlier last year. They shared a story of how France's former I'm forgetting his actual title. I'm gonna put it somewhere, but he's a former minister. He was a former minister within the French government. He was in a conference and he said that President Macron is basically awakening Africans. How is he doing this? He's awakening Africans by his basically rude behavior, and this awakening of Africans is putting France at a disadvantage that is going to have their French children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren now have to experience the tides turning, in that their children will now have to be coming over into Africa to get the benefits and to get a better, sense of living. I'm paraphrasing horribly here, so that's why I'm saying I reposted this, so maybe I might put just a snippet of it here for you guys to actually see exactly what it is that he said. And I was like, oh, so y'all do know, and y'all still want to come play this propaganda of acting like, oh, we just out here being saviors, we just trying to help you. I think we all know right now who needs the helping.
Then in mid-December 2023, a former economic minister of France, Thierry Breton, said something that honestly, we can't believe went unnoticed. This man posted it on his Twitter page and nobody, not even African media houses, took note of it until now. What he said is something that every African, including African leaders, needs to think about deeply so they can chart the way forward. So what did Breton Thierry say? He said, "It's the imbecility of Emmanuel Macron that opened the eyes of Africans. One thing is sure, if France loses its colonies, our children and grandchildren will go to Africa to search for their livelihoods. Immigration will change direction. Macron needs to go. If not, France will suffer. Europe needs to unite to fight this new African vision. If one of the heads of the putschists falls, the others will abandon the vision. Africa does not have history, so Africa can't manage the world."
And so with that, guys, we are going to move on to women across Africa. Guys, if you have made it to Women Across Africa, this segment is one that tries to highlight some stories that are particularly focusing on African women, and just things that are happening in their day-to-day lives. I've got two stories this week, and unfortunately these are not happy stories. They are really unfortunate, but I think it's also important to highlight that as much as we are making a lot of progress and a lot of strides, which is something I really hope this channel illustrates to you, as that the continent is doing some great things. There are also still blind spots that we have and we really have to pay attention to and deal with. So my first story is dealing with Nigerians who are currently mourning a woman who was allegedly beheaded by her boyfriend, who many has said that he was known rather as to be a gospel singer. So basically, I believe it was this past Sunday, police arrested Tamilia Ajayi, and he's a gospel singer, and he was found with the head of his girlfriend in his bag that he allegedly unalived. I'm not too sure if we are allowed to say murder on YouTube. Sometimes I get confused with TikTok and YouTube. But I bring up this story because I think when COVID hit, there was this new term that came up of like silent pandemic. And the silent pandemic, they use that to refer to the issue of GBV, right? Because one of the major things that came up when the whole world was essentially in lockdown and people did not expect was the unprecedented rise in gender-based violence. But I also think that we didn't at the time highlight also the unprecedented rise in femicide. And so I particularly bring up this story because it is a growing issue. And I say growing issue not to say that it didn't exist prior at the levels at which maybe we are seeing it. I believe that it did exist. I just think that the media was not covering, these issues and these stories as much as they are being covered now. But more than that, I think that obviously not every single story can be covered, just because of how media works. And so this for me was just a very unfortunate, incident that has happened and has served again as a stark reminder of how it is that when it comes to issues of GBV and femicide, we really do need to take a holistic approach, in as much as government obviously can play its role in, helping building the capacity of women, to be more financially independent so that they don't stay in abusive and toxic, relationships or settings, and also, ensure that, our security or our policing systems are able to rapidly respond to calls and cries that women make about GBV, and just making sure that they are, sensitized to how it is that they should respond to victims of GBV, how they should, attend to matters of femicide. I also think that, the rest of us also do, or can play a role in, dealing with this thing from a physical level, that being psychologically. I do think that this issue of whether it's men or women just experiencing such a massive rage whereby they feel like the only option and the only solution is to basically take another person's life, that is something that really has to be addressed. And there's a lot of research that is now coming up to really speak to what informs this kind of violence and maybe some of the things that can be done to tend to it. But I also do think that another interesting thing that I did find coming up in the conversation was the question of whether or not it was ritualism. And I do honestly think, as you guys all know, I am a child of God. I am a firm believer of the fact that also as children of God, this is also something that is a call to action for us, to really take seriously in the place of prayer, because we do also have to ask ourselves, like, at a spiritual level, what is happening that is making our people just have these very violent outbursts that result in such unfortunate circumstances. So with that, I will leave it at that, and I will move on to our second story, which also has to deal with falls under the category of GBV, and it is dealing with a Tanzanian activist who was abducted in Kenya. If you guys are not aware, Kenya has had in recent months an upsurge in there being abductions of various people at different points. It is a growing story that I also am very much keeping my eye on and really trying to educate and inform myself more of before I come and I share it with you guys. But I found this story particularly interesting because it not only relates to the country of Tanzania, but it also ties in the country of Kenya as well. That's why I just shared the whole context of what's happening in Kenya with its abduction. So basically, a prominent Tanzanian activist, Maria Shasai, said that she was abducted by armed men in Kenya and released after several hours. So this lady is one who has really become a prominent voice when it comes to criticizing some of the very, we could even say, dictatorial things that, the Tanzanian government has been doing. And she has, been living in Kenya, but the abduction happened there. Miss Maria is a fierce advocate for land rights and for freedom of expression. So I believe that, her abduction was in relation to the current work that she has been doing. Maria, she goes on to explain, just the ordeal that she experienced during her abduction. So I bring up this story because it shows us the two sides of the coin, right? When it comes to everything that's what's happening in the African continent from a political level. You know, on one side we have, you know, these African leaders who are really doing some great things. They're pushing the boundaries, you know, they're really being radical in their efforts. And then on the other side, we still have, you know, other governments who are really set, you know, on staying as this old guard that will keep things as usual. And it really does make us, you know, realize that as a people, we still have the responsibility of, you know, holding our leaders to account and really shedding light on these injustices, because again, the more visibility they get, the more it weakens, you know, these powers that just think that because, you know, they have got certain resources and, you know, certain, I guess, you know, financial power, that they can just dictate and do that which they want with African people, with their own people. That is not the case. That is incorrect. And I think if we want to be Africans that will be active citizens and will, you know, really be, you know, in control of the kind of future we want to build, we have to have the courage to, you know, confront these kind of realities. So I'm just putting this story here to shed light on it, and, you know, also just, you know, as a way of just showing solidarity to this amazing woman who is continuing to spearhead a movement that many would shy away from obvious reasons, you know, having one's life being under threat. But also I bring it up because of the fact that I find it pretty interesting how Kenya has had a wave of disappearances, especially after last year's youth-led protests against like a series of, you know, planned tax raises, right? And for me, it's just, you know, unfortunate to see a country want to silence its youth in such a very violent and strategic manner. And I say strategic because, guys, fear is a weapon, and fear can so easily be weaponized to keep people in place and keep people, you know, subjected to whatever it is that you deem them worthy of, you know, receiving and getting. And, you know, last year the protests in Kenya were just so encouraging because of how the country really came together to come and just, you know, say no, to come and put their foot down on something that was negatively affecting their lives, and really had no rationale to it. The more such stories are able to go viral, the more that Africans are able to know about this, the less power it gives, because when something that is happening in the dark comes into light, it loses its power. And as a Christian, we know exactly where I am quoting that for, with which a verse that says that when light comes, darkness cannot comprehend it. So guys, with that is our Woman Across Africa, and now we will be moving on to the final segment of the show, which is Woman of the Week. Guys, if you have made it this far, as you know, you are the bomb.com. Yes, thank you so much. Guys, this Woman of the Week is taking us to Kenya, and we are meeting a lovely lady by the name of Catherine Kamaya. I pray to God that I said that right, but also to my fellow Africans, if I do not say a name right, just feel free to correct me. We are all here to learn, you know. But basically, I loved this woman's story for like a number of reasons. And just to give a bit of context, this was a lady who was really, you know, thriving in corporate, and she decided, you know, to choose a different path for herself. And that path was basically, sorry guys, I just wanted to check that the mic is still working, because you know, sometimes things be happening. But yeah, so she chose an alternative path, and that path was really one that would have her, you know, serve as a beacon of, of hope, of inspiration, of encouragement to a lot of young ladies. So some of the things that this wonderful lady has done, let me just highlight them here. So she is known for her Global Girls Bill of Rights. This is known as her proudest work. And basically this was a declaration of rights for all girls. And it was written by over 1,000 girls. So 1,000 girls essentially contributed to this Global Girls Bill of Rights that she made. She also is the director of programs at She's the First organization, where she designs programs that meet the felt needs of women and girls. She has used her first-hand experience to really work with like a number of organizations to help them capacitate, young girls, and basically ensure that she gives or those organizations rather give these young girls an environment in which they are able to thrive and realize their fullest potentials. And guys, this kind of work is really exceptional because, as you know, I think they are like soft skills that young girls need to be given, which are often overlooked. And these soft skills are like so important because of how, guys, as we know, as women, we have so many issues that we are confronted with: issues of insecurity, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, not having enough representation that will validate our dreams and things that we think we can and we can't do. And so to be able to have a woman such as Catherine, who is being intentional in helping organizations ensure that they mentor and they empower girls at a holistic level, soft skills, hard skills, whatever it is, but it must be holistic. It's just really great. It's exceptional because it means that we are making powerful, confident, courageous, strong, young women who will be really taking, the reins in various things in their society. And so, guys, with that, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. As always, thank you so much for the comments. As I always say, the conversation does not end here. Okay, let us continue in the comment section. Share some things with me as I share more things with you. But as always, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you found this episode as informative as I did. And with that, guys, have a great and best week ahead. Bye.
At She's the First, our mission is to ensure every girl, no matter where she's born, is educated, respected, and heard. As the director of programs and impact at this organization, I support moving over $570,000 every year to local grassroots organizations in South Sudan, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, Peru, Guatemala, Nepal, and India, who are working on the forefronts to strengthen programs reaching the most underserved adolescent girls. A typical day looks like offering training, mentorship, and support to these organizations to have more meaningful girl-centered programs to be able to reach and support adolescent girls at their felt need. I'm really excited to be able to do this both virtually and in person during conducting site visits to be able to strengthen organizations as well as build capacities of CBOs, especially the leaders who are working with and for girls. A major impact that we are excited about is every year we are able to reach over 200,000 girls through our toolkits and trainings.